Hello, Thursday afternoon. Garland Nixon here with the one and only Larry C. Johnson. All kinds of madness going out, and I think Larry's going to try to make some sense of it. Let's talk. Hello, Garland Nixon here with former CIA analyst Larry Johnson, and he seems to be pretty good at figuring out what's going on with the geopolitical strategy on the international level. Larry, welcome back, and thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to hang out with us.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Let's start here. Get your thoughts on this. And this is what was popping in my mind. Biden every 4 years, either Obama's with hope and change of all these wonderful things that he's going to do. Of course, all lies. He ends up attacking 7 countries. Biden comes in. Oh, we're going to do what was it? Free junior college for everybody, and we're going to do this and that. All you get is war. Trump came in and really was like, it sounded revolutionary, for God's sake. Trump's like, look, judge me by the wars I end. Judge me by the wars I don't start. I'm going to be the peacemaker. I mean, he was straight up. I'm all about peace. I talked to Xi Jinping and I said, let's bring peace to the world. That lasted 8 weeks. 8 weeks. You know what I mean? It's like he didn't try to fake it for a little bit longer. 8 weeks in, they're blowing people up in Gaza again. He's attacking Yemen. And there's like some great buildup on some B-52 island. God only knows, are they going to bomb Yemen with that? Are they going to attack Iran? And you're looking at it and you're like, geez, 8 weeks, that's all we get now? Some of them, at least the other two, gave us a little longer with their lies. They dragged us out for 6 to 8 months. Now all we get is 8 weeks. Your thoughts, Larry?
No, I agree. It's a little bit starting to look like bait and switch. I think you and I both probably held high hopes when, even just before he was sworn in on January 20th, Steve Witkoff, his personal secretary, had gone over to the Middle East and basically told Bibi Netanyahu, hey, you're going to meet with me. I don't care whether you think it's Sabbath or not. You're going to meet with me and you're going to do this deal. And it looked like Trump was willing to hold Netanyahu's feet to the fire and make a deal come about. And then about the same time, Trump published put out on Truth Social the video of Jeffrey Sachs, where Sachs correctly noted that Bibi Netanyahu was a deep, dark son of a bitch. And you're going, whoa. So we all took hope in that. And man, Trump appears to be the real deal. He is sincere about peace. And then got the opening going with the Russians, started talking to them. But now we're seeing let's call it the Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde foreign policy. Yeah, he's talking peace with the Russians, sort of. But again, operating on a lot of false assumptions, false premises. And then he has gone full Zionist crazy. He's coordinated with Bibi Netanyahu so that they could relaunch their genocide on the Palestinian people. We've seen from this thing that everyone's referring to as Signalgate, where they had this chat and were discussing, it wasn't discussing war plans, it was discussing sensitive operational details. And I guarantee you that was classified information. What do I know? I only worked in military special operations for 23 years and, saw military classified documents on actual military operations. And in that, then we find out such a cynical, deceitful view that they're going to attack Yemen, not because of what Yemen was doing, because in fact, Yemen had suspended combat operations. It suspended attacks on Israel. It suspended attacks on the ships in the Red Sea because of the ceasefire. They were trying to uphold the ceasefire. That's why they were doing the attacks all along, to support the Palestinian people, to try to get Israel to stop the genocide. It stopped, at least temporarily, so the Houthis had backed off. So here we get the insight that, the Trump people, man, they're just going to bomb them to send a message. And, we can get into later, if you like, just how stupid that decision was, because it reflected a total ignorance of the problems that the Biden administration ran into with conducting those kind of naval operations, namely that the screening ships, the destroyers and the cruisers, they don't have an unlimited supply of missiles on board. And when they're firing missiles as air defense weapons against incoming missiles and drones, they run out within a week and a half. And then they have to sail out of the Gulf, which means the aircraft carriers got to leave with them because they can't stand there alone naked. And they have to go reload someplace, except the other problem is the missiles they want to reload with, U.S. doesn't have an unlimited supply of those either. They've got actually a very, very limited supply. 660 as of 2018, I believe. That's 7 years ago. I don't know if, how much that was increased, but they've certainly used up a fair amount since then. And then all of this for the purpose of, as they're saying, Trump was using crude sexual imagery. He says, well, we're in the short strokes now, short strokes with Iran. We're going to go to war with Iran. And, they've started moving aircraft carriers and then the B-2 bombers and the B-52s to Diego Garcia, which is that little speck of an island that the Brits taken away, one of the last vestiges of colonialism. And we are definitely staging military assets there that will capable of striking Iran. And then here's where it gets really the problem. The Trump administration, we've heard it from Witkoff, we've heard it from Mike Waltz, the national security advisor, we've heard it from Trump. They really, truly believe that when the Israelis hit Iran on October 27th of last year, that Israel destroyed Iran's air defense system. They've been stripped. They're bare naked. You're hearing it on Fox from the likes of Jack Keane saying the same stupid stuff. And, when you operate with that assumption and, you say, I'm looking at that guy. He doesn't look that tough. He's smaller than me. I'd take him in a heartbeat. And you don't realize that you're going up against an actual world-class boxer. I may be bigger than Sugar Ray Leonard, but I think Sugar Ray Leonard could still put a hurting on me, So here's the United States getting ready to attack Iran when Iran has robust air defense, and it's got the full backing now of Russia, as well, both in terms of providing weaponry, electronic warfare equipment, anti-air, air defense systems, as well as, they've got a comprehensive strategic security agreement. So, Trump is bumbling into war in the Middle East. And if he does it, it's going to destroy his presidency.
Yeah, that's what I've been saying. I said, if Trump's going to do this in a month, let's say it's 12 weeks in, I'll say that my opinion is his presidency is 12 weeks long because, okay, where have we heard this before? Oh, they're just a country, a gas station disguised as a country. Russia can't possibly stand up. Ukraine's going to defeat them. The sanctions will just destroy them and they'll go to pieces. They'll collapse and then Putin will be overthrown. And we'll go in there and we'll have all the oil and gas we want. And then we can move on to China and finish with, these optimistic, absurd assumptions. And I've heard this before. What is it? The first rule of combat: never underestimate your adversary. right?
Yeah.
The first rule of conflict. So, okay, that was a proxy war, which means that your proxy is going to get bashed to pieces. And that's precisely what's happening. Okay. They ain't planning on a proxy war. Now, my understanding of what a lot of things I saw online was that when Israel went to launch their attack on Iran, they couldn't get within like 100 or 150 kilometers of the Iranian
airspace. Yeah, the
airspace, because Iran was locking in on them with all manner of air defense, and they had to turn back and just throw a couple missiles and get the hell out of there.
Correct.
And then they came back and said, we wiped out all of their air defense. Okay, that sounds great. Meanwhile, Russia comes in. My understanding is Russia is helping them build a net-centric integrated air defense, including all kinds of electronic warfare and all kinds of. If you go barreling in there thinking, oh, they're weak, we'll send the F-18s and this and that and all, if you are wrong, those pilots are dead. A lot of them are dead. And we don't have hypersonic missiles, and a lot of the conventional good air defense systems of today can shoot down the subsonic missiles. You come barreling in there, okay, we're going to get Iran, and they knock the hell out of you. And then what? Do you like, oh, we've got to fire nuclear weapons to stop them from getting nuclear weapons? Because they may be crazy enough to use nuclear weapons, so we got to use because we got the hell knocked out of us. And then they just simply wipe out the entire Western economy. I'll put it like this. If you attack them, even if they don't fire a missile, if they close down the Straits of Hormuz, 30% of the world's oil, our economy's wiped out. You think eggs are expensive now. And that's like 3 months, 2 months into your presidency? Yeah. You're thinking of doing that?
Yeah. No, they haven't thought this through. This is, this is why Pete Hegseth has demonstrated this week in particular why he is singularly unqualified to be Secretary of Defense. Because the president would have said, okay, look, I want to make a strike on Yemen as a prelude to going after Iran. And Hegseth's not the kind of guy that's going to go and say, Mr. President, I understand why you're wanting to do that, but let me lay out to you what are some of the downsides, some of the problems with that. And, you go through the fact that we've got limited missiles that can supply the air defense to the systems. That at some point, if we start a conflict with Yemen, we're going to have to back our naval forces out of the Red Sea simply to reload, which is going to be perceived as weakness, that we're retreating. It's going to give them a moral boost. So let's not do that. And that we don't have a high degree of confidence that Iran's air defense system has been decimated. And we'll note that the intelligence community continues to assess, as it came out on Monday with the annual threat assessment, that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Iran does not have a nuclear weapon. So we don't need to use the threat. That we've got to stop that. Plus, let's recall that you're the one that walked out of the JCPOA in the first place, which was a system to prevent Iran from having a nuclear weapon. And now Iran's got this security arrangement with Russia. So for all of these reasons, let's tone down the public threats. Let's work behind the scenes and see what we can get. You know what? I think if Trump had sort of kept his mouth shut and worked with the Russians and not been touting about how he's been a tough guy with Iran, he actually probably could have gotten an agreement in place with Iran being guaranteed by Russia, which would give him, heavens, those would be bragging rights.
Yep.
But instead of that, Trump's, he's doing I'm going to pound my chest, the art of the deal for New York real estate, where you threaten and you go over the top and then you try to back it down. Iran's not having any of it. And the Russians are watching and saying, is he really this crazy?
Yeah. I like, one of the things I like to do with people is, whenever I talk about international policy, or something kicks off somewhere, right? Oh, Nagorno-Karabakh. The first thing I do is pull up a map. and
Yeah.
I look and I see what's around it, what waterways, what's going, who are they close to, what borders of this, you know what I mean? You know, if you're going to analyze something, you know, geopolitically speaking. Now, here's the thing we got to look at if we're looking at the issues here. Okay. So here's the Red Sea, right? For those of you know, you and I are both familiar with this, but some of our viewers may be. Now, if we look at this, we got the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. Might I add, I think the Suez crisis is what ended the British Empire. Just saying, kind of in the same area, right?
Right.
But you got the Red Sea there, right? And there you have, we can't get through the Bab al-Mandab Straits because Yemen, little old Yemen stops us.
Right.
But right over there, not far away, actually far away, but on this map, not far away, you got the Straits of Hormuz. And what comes out of there? The oil from Kuwait, the oil from Iraq, the gas and oil from Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, etc. Right? So we've got a skinny little strait here, the Straits of Hormuz, a skinny little strait here, the Straits of Bab al-Mandab. If we go to war with Iran, you and I both know you can damn sure be absolutely skippy. They're going to close both of them.
Yeah.
30% of the oil shut down. And as far as for Europe, especially, how are they going to get anything? And let me add this. As terrible as it's terrible. Now, who will be selling in the price of oil will go through the roof. And who said will be the big oil winner? Russia. They'll be the only ones with oil left. Yeah. Russia will be the richest country in the world. Oil will be like $500, $600, $700 a gallon, and they won't be able to pump it fast enough. But the bottom line is, if you look at this from the instance of from the perspective of shipping lanes and the importance of getting the oil and gas around, this is catastrophic for the Western economy.
Right.
On a scale that most people can't even imagine.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And again, this is, you know, this is where you need some people with experience and that are not going to be emotionally charged to react. I mean, candidly, when you know, it's not a knock on all these 40-year-old guys, but Marco Rubio, Michael Waltz, and Pete Hegseth, you know, they're just they're about 10 years removed from a frat party. And none of them have demonstrated sort of the gravitas of let's think first before we act, and let's sit down and learn how to weigh the options. That's one of those things that you tend to learn as you grow older. You know, I did a lot of stupid shit when I was in my 20s. Now I can at least think about not doing the stupid stuff because there is that voice in your head that says, "Is that really a good idea?" You may want to rethink that. And that's sort of what Trump needs around him. And again, sadly, I don't think he has. There's the closest that comes is J.D. Vance. You know,
or
when you
hopefully, I would think, hopefully Tulsi Gabbard. But yeah, you know, she seems to be awful shaky, to be honest with you. But from what I've seen of her right now,
yeah, no, I agree. She was, you know, she's really not even good at answering these attacks on herself. You know, like they said, "Hey, you didn't agree that Edward Snowden was a traitor." Well, you know, again, what she should have said then was, "Well, you know, Senator, I deal with facts. So let me review the facts with you. Edward Snowden has not been charged with treason. He has not been tried or convicted of treason. So my opinion is not relevant here. What's relevant are the facts. You're hiring me as an intelligence officer to deal with facts, which is what I'm going to do. So no, Edward Snowden's not a traitor. He is guilty of misusing and mishandling classified information."
Let me add this. Right now, they're allegedly supposed to be talking with the Russians, right? If you're the Russians, you're looking at them and you're like, you've broken every stinking deal with me.
Yes.
You broke a deal with Iran. And then you said, "Oh, well, we can't let them get nuclear weapons." And the Russians said, "Yeah, we're willing to work with you. We'll talk with Iran. We're friends with them. We can work something out," right? And your own intelligence people just said 2 days ago, nah, they don't have, it doesn't look like they're developing nuclear weapons. And you're like, yes, we've got to attack them. Why? To stop them from getting nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
If you are the Russians and you're talking with these clowns, you got to say to yourself, they're unhinged. Why would I trust them about anything?
Yeah, well, in fact, that's what has transpired in the course of the last 3 years. The start of the special military operation really marks a watershed in Russian-U.S. relations, because I think that's finally the point where the Russians realized we can't trust the bastards. They've broken every agreement. The anti-ballistic missile treaty, George W. Bush walked away from that. The Intermediate Nuclear Forces Agreement, Donald Trump walked away from that. We've had the Minsk 1, Minsk 2, the Europeans walked away from that. So, and then we actually had an initial tentative peace agreement with Ukraine in March of 2022, and the United States came in and sabotaged it. So, you know what? We're not going to trust your word anymore. We're not going to trust your promise. You're going to have to show us action. And so, you want like this grain, supposedly they've negotiated a grain deal in the Black Sea. Great. Get those sanctions listed. Once the sanctions are lifted, then we'll allow that grain to start flowing. Because that's one thing that you tangibly can do. Lift those sanctions. But that's the problem for the United States. Europe controls a lot of those sanctions too. And Europe just said, hell no, we're not lifting sanctions. So, here's now the United States trying to make deals. It's like somebody's trying to sell your house for you, but they're not telling you, you're not really cut in on the deal. But you have to sign off on it at the end. And so they come up and say, hey man, I got this great deal. I'm selling your house for $200,000 less than what you wanted. And you're going, I ain't signing off on that. That's sort of what the Europeans are doing right now to the United States. So the Russians, they're just sitting back to say, hey, we'll talk. This is what we want. And they're not backing off of it. They don't have to make concessions. And that's where Trump and his team are making a mistake. They believe they got enough leverage over the Russians that the Russians are going to be compelled to make concessions. No, they're not. I'll take anybody's money on that one.
I agree with you. Look, the Russians don't need a deal. I remember reading way back when that in the beginning of the conflict, when Macron spoke with Putin, and Putin said, we will achieve our goals either by diplomacy or force of arms. Yeah, that was reported. That's where they are now. They're a hell of a lot closer to force of arms than diplomacy, and it is existential. It's on their border, and they're going to do what they got to do. The only way you're going to stop the Russians is go in there and fight them and stop them, and you still ain't going to stop them if you go in there and fight them. So there's no option. You can go in and fight them, but the NATO does not have the military wherewithal to stop Russia. And the other thing I think that the Russians have to be looking at is this. I don't care what the Americans say. The Americans say, all right, we got a deal on not hitting energy infrastructure. Well, as soon as they say that, the Ukrainians are going to say, hey, we got to hit as much energy infrastructure as we can. You know what I mean? Everything that they do, the Ukrainians go out of their way to demonstrate that they ain't going along with it. And the same with the Europeans. So the other part of it is, it's not just can the Russians make a deal with the US, but the Russians are like, okay, you got a couple of mad dogs. I can make a deal with you. You have to demonstrate to me that you can bring your mad dogs to heel. Right now, they're nipping at your ankles, not mine.
Yeah. Well, while we were talking, just on the screen flash, H.R. McMaster, and the tag said, Putin is the best liar in the world. So again, that kind of ignorance demonstrated by this clown. And that's one of the problems and weaknesses of our approach. We don't listen to what Putin says, and we don't believe what he says. Now, Ray McGovern's always said, listen to the Russians, listen to what they say. And that was why it was, instructive. I had that chance to, sit down with Sergei Lavrov 3 weeks ago. And, the, you and I have both been around people who, they're raconteurs, they're bullshitters, they can tell a good story, they can puff things up. They're artful liars. But you also know those who are, telling you as it is, that they're not putting any gloss on it, they're not shining it up. And that was Lavrov. He said, hey, this is our position, this is what we believe. Because when I asked him specifically about Putin's conditions that he laid out in June of 2024 for bringing an end to the war, Lavrov went through a discussion of it and said, no, there's no daylight between us. It's not like Putin says one thing and I'm going to say another thing and we're going to let the Americans guess what our position is. No, the Russians have been 100% consistent on this. Whether it's Putin, whether it's Peskov, his spokesperson, Maria Zakharova, she said it as the press spokeswoman for the foreign ministry. Sergei Lavrov said it. Medvedev said it, the former president of Russia. Sergei Rybkov, the deputy foreign. I mean, they're all saying the same thing. So at some point you ought to say, maybe we ought to listen to them because they ain't playing.
Yeah. I put it to you like this, if you and I, either one of us, they said tomorrow, Larry Johnson, you're the president. If they said to me, God, you're the president, I'd say, okay, we got to do some evaluations. What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What are our problem areas? What are the military? Get to me. How much? What do we have? What can we do? What can't we do? I would want to know, what are our weaknesses? What are our restrictions? And I will guarantee you this. We have been pumping so much military war material into Ukraine and into the Israel for the last couple of years that we're probably on rock bottom. Oh, I guarantee you and I both know we're real short of stuff. Okay. You ain't talking about attacking Iraq or Afghanistan. You're talking about a country that has legitimate defense, that actually has some significant capabilities that you don't have. We don't have hypersonic missiles. You know what I mean? We don't even know what they have. They might have S-400s. They probably do. You know what I mean? They got some stuff that we don't even know what capabilities. We don't know what they have. You're going to go in there making the assumption that you can beat them. What happens if they knock the crap out of you? You know what? What's the plan then? You go, okay, we're going to hit them hard. You know what that sounds like? It sounds like Wolfowitz and Pearl. Shock and awe. We're going to hit Yemen hard. And Yemen, you know what Yemen does when you punch him? You punch him in the face and Yemen just smiles and shakes it off and goes, is that all you got?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we're not, it's like, what happens if you hit Iran? Oh, we're going to strike Iran. I love these words. Strike Iran. Wait a minute. That assumes that your strike will be successful. And what are the possibilities? What can Iran do to strike back? And is it worth, you know what I mean? They don't seem like there's anybody in the room sticking their hand up. Mr. President, what? Perhaps we should reconsider. You don't see anybody around him. Maybe we just don't see it, but it doesn't seem like that's happening, Larry.
Yeah, well, so we've never had a single instance in history where dropping a bomb or one bombing run has changed a country's political outlook, political views, or policy. People say, well, what about the atomic bomb? Hey, we had to drop 2 of those. Even with an atomic bomb, one didn't work. So, but now we've not learned the lessons. We bombed Vietnam relentlessly. That didn't bring the Vietnamese to heel. We had lots of bombing runs in Korea. That wound up in a stalemate. We bombed Iraq, still had to put troops on the ground, and after, 15 years, we still hadn't, quote, conquered and pacified the country where it was under what we'd consider complete control. And it was even longer, 20 years in Afghanistan that we failed. And again, you're going up against guys that are just carrying rifles, sidearms, occasional RPG, rocket-propelled grenade, and maybe a mortar. They didn't have artillery. They didn't have tanks. They didn't have fixed-wing aircraft. They didn't have helicopters. And we couldn't beat them. So it's like, to me, it seems like there ought to be a little humility taking hold of us. And you know what? We may not be as big and bad as we think we are. And we want to think this through before we get ourselves tangled up in a war that could be very, very costly. Because as you correctly noted, if any attacks are made on the Iranian oil structure, they got the missiles that they can shut down the straits and take out Saudi oil fields, take out oil fields in Bahrain, United Arab Emirates, etc. It get ugly fast, and it's one that we no longer have control. And so here's Trump, who's gone from touting himself as Mr. Peace, that he will have started, been actually maybe lit the fuse on World War III. So it's crazy.
And here's the thing about it is, and it might not be World War III for this reason, because you might get your butt kicked. I mean, it is possible that they could say, okay, we're launching a strike, and in comes the planes, and in comes the missiles, and they just get shot down to hell. And then Iran, who I would suspect has been planning for an attack from the United States for the last 25 years, probably since 79, right? You go in there, they shoot your stuff down, and they say, okay, well, we got to flatten all the bases. Let's see, we got this big babe, the Sixth Fleet, they're done. Every airfield in the area, we can't let them strike back against us, so we got to flatten all of them. Let's see, we got small PMU units in Iraq. You overrun all the American bases and wipe them out. Now, all over West Africa, there's a lot of Shiites. And they say, well, they got some embassies and they got some bases in Africa, and we already set up the hit. You could get obliterated from the region. And I wouldn't see why the Iranians wouldn't have all kinds of backup plans to say, if they hit us, we can obliterate them. They're home. You don't live there. This is an expeditionary force that's going to the home of a region, not to mention, you have a lot of countries, and I want to get your thoughts on this. There are a number of countries in the region where the people who run the country are very close to the West, but the people in the country don't like us.
Yeah.
And they might cut their heads off. And then those countries may say, I mean, some of these countries, literally, these royal families, if you get into some kind of instance like this, there's potential that these governments could be overthrown. And then the people that run these countries now just say, that's it, we're never selling anything to you guys again. Let's close down your, then what do you do?
Yeah. The Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia are especially fragile. They're brittle, or I describe them as brittle political systems. They don't have a lot of give. They kind of get pushed hard, they break. And we've forgotten over time, right after 9/11, probably the only country in the Middle East that actually held a candlelight vigil to pray for the victims of that attack was Iran. It wasn't in Egypt. It certainly wasn't Turkey. So, we've convinced ourselves that Iran is this terrible, terrible enemy that we've got no other choice but to combat them. And so once that becomes part of your assumption, and then these assumptions just builds on another, and before long you're taking action that you've talked yourself into it. There's no way you can get out of it. I've used the metaphor that if I put you on a roof and blindfold you and I say, hey, Garland, trust me, man, it's only a 3-foot drop. Just jump off. You'll be okay. And so you assume that I'm telling you the truth. Well, what I didn't tell you was it's actually 80 feet. So what happens if you jump off that roof and you fall 80 feet? You probably ain't coming out of that alive. And the point of that illustration is the assumptions we make about things can have a very definite effect on the outcome. And when you've got Donald Trump and Witkoff and Hegseth and Waltz, they're all assuming that Iran's weak, that we're strong, and that when we put the pressure on Iran, boy, the just like what happened to Bashar al-Assad, collapsing on itself. We're going to march in and take over, and everything will be perfect, just like it is right now in Syria. Oh, well, yeah, that Syria thing's not quite going as we thought. And, these kinds of false assumptions without stepping back saying, okay, what are we assuming here? And do we have actually any evidence to support those assumptions? They're not doing that. They're just acting with on emotion. They're like, oh yeah, we got to be right on this. And anybody that tries to raise an objection or to say caution, you get immediately attacked. And then we've seen the same thing on the Russia front. Anybody that's tried to say, hey, don't pick a fight with the bear. You don't want to wake up that bear. He's going to eat you alive. Well, we're finding out the hard way that that's exactly what has happened.
What's interesting is the Trump people come in, and when it comes to Russia, they start off by saying the truth. They're like, look, the Biden administration just wasn't realistic here. And they're saying Russia's their army, and look at their history. When you come to their border and fight them, it's never going to turn out well. And I'm like, oh wow, they're realistic. This was if we came up to their border, if it was me, I can understand why they're. And you're thinking, wow, real politics, real foreign policy. That makes sense. The Biden administration was out in space. They'd make up some narrative and live by it. And you're thinking, okay, maybe. For God's sake, we finally got somebody that's going to live in the real world.
Right.
And now they're like pretending that Iran is, Afghanistan in 2003. And you're like, I'm just a schmuck on YouTube, but I can read. And I'm like, dude, if I was advising you, I'd say this is probably a pretty bad move. It's not, it's like they're so used to punching around these little guys. Anytime they wanted, whatever I want to do, hey, there's a country, we'll do bomb them, attack them, do whatever they can't do. And they're like, oh, well, there's Iran. We will strike them also. And you're like, man, that's not a little guy. Do you understand what you're doing? I'll add this. The Russians kept saying, don't send Ukraine ATACMS. They're going to strike deep in Russia. Don't do this. Don't do that. No matter what, we fed more. Give them this. Give them something else. Let them hit more. Let them do terrorist attacks, Crocus City Hall, anything we want, right? The Russians back then said, turnabout's fair play. I would imagine, which Iran already has a legitimate indigenous military complex. But I would imagine the Russians have probably armed them to the teeth pretty well. Hey, if I'm the Russian, let's be honest, if you did that to me on my border, even swap ain't no swindle, as my dad used to say.
Well, what we've seen is that this relationship between both Russia and Iran and China and Iran is not something that's just developed in the last 2 weeks. They conducted the Russians and Chinese conducted the first joint naval military exercise with Iran in 2019, March of 2019. So first 2 weeks in March, every year since, they've conducted that exercise. Now, why is that important? Well, it means that the respective militaries of each of those countries are getting to know each other. They're developing friendships. They're developing relationships. They're also developing sort of scenarios for how they'll work together, where the Russia and China come to the aid of Iran. And I used to script and develop those exercises for the military, sort of like what these folks are doing. And the planning process for that usually starts minimum of 12 months out and more likely 18 months at least. So just run the calendar. If they were doing this exercise in March of 2019, that means they probably started planning for it in October of 2017. So we're looking at almost full 8 years of cooperation between Russia, China, and Iran. When I read this, the annual threat assessment put out by Tulsi Gabbard's shop, the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, man, there is no analysis, no acknowledgement of that reality. So, if you're trying to say, okay, let's talk about the threat, and here's the threat for, they do what I call stovepiping. Let's look at the threat of Iran. It's just Iran sort of independent of everybody else. China, independent of everybody else. Iran, folks, they're working together. Now, I'm not suggesting necessarily that's a bad thing. That's what I would do if I was them.
Certainly.
I'd work together. But my point is, our intelligence community is not taking that on board and factoring it into its military plans, which is why then you get all these simplistic assumptions, wrong assumptions about the true capability of these various countries. I forget the name of the kid, the American who was living like in Dubai or something, and he went on a tour of Iran, and his is entirely like what I call one of those travel vlogs, video logs. He wasn't trying to make any kind of political statement at all, but he just went on a tour from Iran. Well, it turns out part of his video log, he was in Tehran on October 27th when the Israelis attacked. And he got a little bit of film footage, but he was like, I watched, and all these missiles that were inbound were getting shot down. Now, my point in that is, he was just given his objective viewpoint. He wasn't there on any kind of political mission, wasn't tasked by the CIA or anybody. He was just given an honest assessment that bolsters what Iran had said and what the Russians had said, that, yeah, they shot down the vast majority of these missiles that Israel thought that were going to be surefire hits. So my point in all of this is, we in the West have so grossly underestimated, we're so badly misinformed on Iran and its capabilities, and yet we're picking a fight with them. And I think it's going to turn out badly. And, if somebody has Trump's ear, they got to get a hold of him and say, Mr. President, you don't want to do this. Let's stop all the outward bullying and threatening. We don't need to do that. Let's do it behind the scenes. And then you can actually get a deal that will be verifiable. But
the U.S. has lost any moral strength of gravitas that it had in the world. Not that we had much, don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying that people looking at what's happening the last 18, 20 months, however long it's been, 2 years, we might as well say, in Israel, around the world, are saying, man, this is really wrong. What the heck are you people doing here, right?
Right.
But to add to that, to go after Iran, which could have devastating effects on the world, I think you kind of end the U.S. in a way. Yeah, and here's what I mean. Look, we're always talking about, okay, we're going to sanction country X, right? What happens if Russia and China and India wake up one day and they see, oh, we attack Iran and we're doing whatever over there, and they look, they say, you know what? Yeah, we like having the U.S. market, but they're so outrageous. They've got so over the top. We can't deal with them anymore. And they call up China. We're now down to 16% of their exports. We're not what we used to be to them. And they say, you know what? We're not Russia, which we buy a lot of stuff from. They say, we're not selling you that uranium for your nuclear power stations, that diesel and all the stuff you've been finding. Nah. And China says, we're not shipping you guys anything anymore because you guys, forget it, we'll sell elsewhere. You've gone too far. India, all the stuff you're buying for medication and this and that. Oh, we got to cut you loose. What happens if it turns around and the world looks at us and sees us as a threat, and the other countries start saying, we're going to turn down the volume on U.S.? Our leaders don't believe that could happen, but I think it's a possibility if we push it too far.
Oh, no, I think you're right. And, I've been using the metaphor of a toxic romantic relationship. And I'm sure, a lot of the people that are watching you or listening to you, they've they've had a bad relationship or two. And I'm talking about that relationship that with your significant other, they lie to you, they're abusive to you, they maybe steal from you. But yet, there's always that, oh, please, I didn't mean it. I'm sorry. Can we, let's give it one more chance. Let's try again. I'm going to be different. And then by God, they do the same shit all over again. And you reach a point where you say, you know what? I can't live with this. This relationship is costing me too much. I'm going to move on and find another way. That's exactly what China and Russia are doing now. Are they going to try to be polite to us? Sure. Are they going to try to be cordial to us if they can? Yes. But they're not going to, we don't get to beat up on them anymore. That's why China, we started imposing all these sanctions on China. Oh, we're going to really hurt China. China didn't need anything that we had. It's not like there was some, oh my God, the United States has this precious mineral. If we don't get that, boy, we're done. Whereas the United States absolutely needs some things that China has, and China said, nope, you're cut off. Antimony is one of those rare earth minerals. It is a critical component in the production of military, of artillery shells, for example. And, they've cut it off. And guess what? It turns out that Russia and China, the numbers I saw, control 90% of the supply of antimony. And who controls the other 10%? Oh, that'd be Iran. So right now, we basically have got toxic relationships with the three countries that control something that we absolutely need to stay in the military business. And instead of recognizing that and trying to maintain the relationship, no, we're going for the confrontation route. It's just crazy.
Here's the other thing. Trump has a coalition which right now kind of protects him, right? He's got a coalition. He's got the libertarians, they're on his coalition big time. Then he's got the MAGA people, which I've said over and over. People are like, oh, that's Trump's MAGA. I said, no, that's the Tea Party. The Tea Party was there first. After 2008, the Tea Party rose up. And they were pissed about what? It was economics. They were mad over the bailouts. You remember that? The Tea Party was regular old working class people who were pissed about the bailouts, pissed about getting screwed in 2008, and they rose up. And then Trump came along and kind of commandeered the Tea Party. You know what I mean? And that's why I've said all along, for these people that say, oh, no matter what, MAGA won't leave. And I say, that's the Tea Party. They were there before Trump. And if Trump pisses these people off and they feel that they've been screwed, they will walk away from him because they were there before him. You've got the libertarians. How much of this warmongering before they say this ain't what we voted for? This is the real politically bad enough militarily. The stupid thing is this. If Trump's coalition abandons him, his enemies will eviscerate him. You know what I mean? The ones that hate him, the liberals and all of the neocons and all, they can't go after him because he's got a pretty broad coalition. If that coalition walks away, they will tear him limb from limb politically and probably throw him in jail within hours. If not, let's say, far worse, that they've already tried. You know what I'm saying? That's the other stupid part about Trump. He doesn't understand. You got a political base. You got to hold on to that base, and they do not want war. They brought him in there because they had, all the woke stuff they didn't like, and they didn't like the all the money going to the war machine when people were having problems here. I think that was the main part of it, and he's just going right back into that Biden crap.
Yeah, well, his appointments reflect sort of the lack of judgment. So naming Mike Huckabee, for example, to be ambassador to Israel. Huckabee is just, he's crazy. Because the other day he said, the reason we got to support Israel at all costs. Because if we don't stop them, Iran's going to destroy Israel, and then we're next. Iran is going to attack the United States. And it's like, the fact that he really believes that is what's alarming. Because Iran has shown the terrorist attacks that are linked to or what we call terrorist attacks, the attacks on U.S. interests that are linked to Iran, such as the bombing of the Marine barracks in 1983 and the bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Beirut in 1983. We like to pretend that that was just unprovoked attacks sponsored by Iran, without acknowledging that our battleships were hurling shells into the Bekaa Valley. We were killing Shia Muslim, and it was retaliation for what we were doing. But we never tell ourselves that part of the story. But since then, Iran has not been implicated in a single terrorist attack inside the United States. That is, in fact, the Sunnis, Al Qaeda. And who was it that wants to destroy Iran? Al Qaeda, ISIS. Who was it that Iran was fighting in Syria? Al Qaeda, ISIS, same as us. So when it comes to Islamic extremism, the Salafis, the Wahhabis, that's who Iran is against. Iran's not that crazy version of Islam. Those are the Sunnis. And when you go back through the U.S. annual report on country reports on terrorism, every year for the last 20 years, Iran doesn't have a single group in the top 10 of terrorist groups that Iran was backing. They're all Sunnis, or the vast majority is Sunnis. You got some, communist Filipino groups in there. It was only in 2023 that finally they put the Palestinian groups backed by Iran on the list. That was because of the October 7th attack. But I maintain most of that was a military operation against military targets, not against civilian targets. But that's not the narrative. The narrative is, this was an unprovoked attack on civilians. So,
well, there's another thing, and I'll say this: back when I was a young fella and you had to have a fast car, I remember I had a Duster, right? And I put rims on it and all that. And you'd go, there was this Burger King where people, that back on Saturday night, all the guys and people shine their cars up. We had, there was Novas and Dusters and Chargers and stuff like that, right? And you put hood pins on, right? Because the pretense was I got all kind of cool stuff on my engine and I don't want somebody to get in. Okay. I had hood pins. I had a 6-cylinder. And when everybody got ready to leave, I'd let them start their cars first because it was like, whoa, 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 whoa. And I didn't want to start my little 6-cylinder. So once all the other loud cars were, I'd start mine. Why? Because it looked fast, but it wasn't fast, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's my point. These people in Washington are always trying to look tough, not be tough. Hey, how things going? Well, we're running out of missiles and we don't have hypersonic missiles. Our air defense doesn't seem to be working right well. We're very well, blah, blah, blah. But we want to bomb somebody who doesn't have an air defense so we can look tough, right? I'm going to tell you something that to me, this makes you look weak. Let me share this with you. Zelensky lashes out at Trump's envoy. The Ukraine's leader accused Witkoff of spreading Kremlin narrative. Now, here's what I'm thinking. This little green suit wearing elf, you let him come to the White House and disrespect you. You're the president. And a week later, you're fine with him. Oh, did I say he was a dictator? I don't remember saying this. He's disrespectful of you. Your guy's working for you. You send him over and he's like, that guy's just a Kremlin narrative. If you want to tell me something that makes you look weak, you support this guy. You pay his salary. You literally pay the salaries of every single person in his country. You provide him with military. You provide him with everything. He has nothing without you. And he spits in your face and you just sit there and take it. To me, if there's anything that makes the Trump team look weak, it's this little putz. Saying anything he wants, knowing they're still going to give it to him. Oh, they look like chumps.
Yeah. Now, Trump needs to move immediately to just say all military aid, all intelligence sharing, that's cut off. That ends now. As ultimately a gesture to Russia that we're serious about bringing this to an end. we're not going to support this anymore. We're not going to enable this. And then send a message through back channels to Zelensky. You either cut this out now, or we're going to confiscate the money that you've stolen. Now, I've got a friend, well, a friend, he's my business partner. I don't call him former, but we're sort of doing things separately these days. But he's just filed a whistleblower complaint with the U.S. Department of Justice concerning $48 billion that have been stolen from Kiev by Zelensky and his crowd. And it's been parked in banks, some of it in the Caribbean. However, Republican and Democrats, 26 of them, have profited from this. One senator, I'll tell you off air who it was, got $17.2 million. Another senator, so that senator got the 17.2 is a Republican, but they're bipartisan. Now, there's a Democrat senator that got $23 million, and it's put into their campaign funds. So basically, it's money that they get to keep. It's black money. That's what's going on. This guy's buying friends in Washington.
Yep.
You say best friends money could buy.
And he's disrespecting Trump and everybody dear to Trump. And everything Trump says, he says, no, I'm not listening to those people. Who do they think they are? And we just giving them money, and you just look like a chump. Yeah. Trump and his people look like a weak, and they're dragged around by this little nothing, this little nobody. Let me ask you this. I think he puts up with far too much from Europe. I mean, he puts up with it from these people. You literally fund 70 to 80% of NATO. And you're like, okay, we want a grain deal. We ain't going to do it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, we're trying to do this. And they're literally like starting Russiagate. Well, I think Trump is under the influence of Putin. Yeah. And they're starting up the Russiagate again. MI6, they're up to no good. They were the ones that pushed Russiagate, that did Russiagate in the first place. They were the impetus behind it, And he's like, okay, you guys are busting my chops nonstop. I'm just going to put up with that. Let me go over here and slide the chair out for Benjamin Netanyahu. Again, you want to talk about something that makes you look weak? You slide the chair out for Netanyahu like a butler and slide it back in. He might as well have said, sir, what kind of a drink, put like a little towel on here. Would you like a drink, please, sir? It was pathetic. How can you do that kind of crap and then walk around like pretending to be a tough guy? Yeah. It embarrasses me.
Yeah, the situation with Europe, it's going to come to a head, because whatever deal was reached in Riyadh on Monday, it's dead on arrival, because Europeans ain't going along with it. And Zelensky's been crapping all over it. And, but it's playing into Russia's hands, because Russia all along has said, look, these are not reasonable, rational people. These are people that want to destroy us. And no matter what we do, no matter what concessions we make or what efforts we make to reach a deal, it's never good enough. So, okay, man, we will restart the grain. We'll allow the grain, but it's going to be a little different this time. We're going to do the inspection of the ships that come through the Bosphorus, through the Straits. We're going to verify that there are no weapons on board. But you're going to lift the sanctions on us, or else we're not going to do this. You've got to show us that you're no longer going to continue business as usual. And Europe's, unless Trump really pulls the plug on Europe to try to coerce them into doing that, this war is going to continue, and Russia's going to win. That's the bottom line. They're going to defeat Ukraine militarily, and it's going to be a big black eye for Trump and for NATO. That's the reality.
He should have listened to Steve Bannon. I keep saying that. Yeah,
Yes.
I got my issues with Steve Bannon. Don't get me wrong. I've known people that were close around him for years, and I know enough about him that I got my issues with Steve Bannon. That being said, if you're right, you're right.
Yeah, yeah,
And Steve
absolutely.
Bannon was like, man, if you don't get this monkey off your back in a hurry, it's your monkey. And now it's his monkey. But now that ain't good enough. I got to go over here and get a gorilla. I got a monkey on my back. Now I'm going to get a gorilla on your back. And here's the other thing, Larry. They're not defeating Ukraine. They're defeating all of NATO.
Yeah.
I don't see how NATO survives this, because you're fighting amongst each other, arguing amongst each other. You now realize the US says we run NATO, but you now realize that you're going to give all this money to Europe. And when you say to Europe, I give you a lot of money, guys, I need you to listen, Europe's going to say no. Thanks for the money, suckers, but I'm not going to do what you say. So what do you have? You know what I mean? What is really NATO if the U.S. kind of had NATO to bring all the countries together so they could control them? And when it's going after the countries will say, well, we'll take your money, but we ain't listening to you. Get out of here.
Well, there's a interesting paragraph in the latest threat assessment from the intelligence community when they're dealing with Russia. And they present as one of the problems Russia faces is the new, they describe it as the new, firmly united and growing in strength NATO. I'm going, do you guys not get to read the newspaper? Do you not have access to the internet? Because that ain't what's going on. NATO's coming apart at the seams. You know, the other day they tried to convene some conference and half the people didn't show up. Like Giorgia Meloni of Italy, like, nah, we're not sending troops and we're not giving any more money. You're crazy. We're not doing that. So, yeah, they've added Finland and Sweden. Ooh, the Russians tremble at that, boy. The fact of the matter is the divisions within Europe are growing. They're not diminishing. Hey, look at that strong relationship between Denmark and the United States. Trump's busy beating Denmark up over Greenland, and Denmark's pissed at Trump over, how dare you? So, I said the instead of objectively look and say, look, NATO's ability to act in a concerted fashion is greatly diminished. It's not increased. Just because they got more members doesn't mean that they're going to be able to get along and make agreements easier. And again, this report, what a pathetic state our intelligence community is. It's awful. The report is probably reflects like a sophomore at a bad college.
It looks like something that would come out under the Biden administration. You know what I mean? You know what it is? It's these same people that live in the narratives. This is the last question. The last thing I'll throw at you. Europe. But here's the sad thing. We look at the UK and we're like, Starmer's out of his flipping mind. They got no military. They're going broke. But even in UK, as dysfunctional as it is, the military comes out the other day and say, hey, guys, sorry, we can't fight Russia.
Yeah,
right? As dysfunctional as it is, the military comes out and says, Ixnay on the usher ray, that ain't happening. We can't do it. This friggin' guy's out of his mind. Not happening, right? Yeah. They make it clear. Somebody in the military establishment just said, we got to come out clean and tell it. So we can talk about how dysfunctional the UK is, but there's at least one person in the military establishment who's got a friggin' brain in his head. And then we look at this joke of a threat assessment that comes out from our combined intelligence services. And right. I got to be honest, we don't have one person. There's at least one, whoever the hell said that in Ukraine. We don't have one person saying, probably not a good idea to fight Russia or China or even Iran, because right now we really can't beat the Houthis. That's all they got to say. We don't have one person that'll say that.
Well, in fact, the entire underlying assumption is, well, these countries are a threat to us. Well, Russia's not a threat to us. We've made Russia a threat to us. because instead of pointing out saying, look, what Russia has become now in the wake of the collapse of the Soviet Union is a country that's strongly nationalist, that is the return to its Christian roots, where the Eastern Orthodox Christianity plays a dominant role in the society, is quite important. And that Russia, at least up until recently, until about 3 years ago, was playing a vital role in hauling our astronauts to and from the space station. That we found Russia continued to find ways to work with us, despite us in trying to impose sanctions on Russia for a variety of things, such as the Magnitsky Act. But you don't get that kind of thinking in there. And again, the same with China. Portraying China as this, imperial, this a country that's ambitious to exercise imperial influence over the world, without one analyst stepping up to say, wait a second, China hasn't invaded anybody in 50 years. They went into Vietnam, they got into a fight with Vietnam over Cambodia. But apart from that, they've not been out conquering countries. Yeah, militarily. Are they cutting economic deals with them? Absolutely. And we're pissed at them just because we can't, we're not doing it. Well, jealousy is not a good foundation for foreign policy. And there's ways that we could cooperate with China, but instead we got to have an enemy, because if you don't have an enemy, man, how are you going to justify that $1 trillion defense budget?
Yeah. Yep. I agree with you. They're like, oh, we're going to lay people off and we're going to do this and that, and we're going to save the government money. And I've said all along, I don't care what they do to save the government money. They will increase the defense budget by more than they save anywhere. And there's no point in laying people off. There's no point in closing parks. There's no point in doing anything to save money, to be quite frank, if you're honest about it. Because if they find a way to save $100 billion, the military industrial complex will say, all right, let's get our lobbyists out to our senators in Congress. It just so happens that they saved $100 billion, and an extra $100 billion in the defense budget would be just what we need to develop a hypersonic or whatever the hell. So that's whatever they save, it's going right to the quote defense budget. So it's a waste of time. They might as well not even bother. Larry Johnson, I really appreciate it. Everyone, before we go, I always like to do this. This is a great website. So I'm going to let everybody see where they can go to get the real info of what's happening. And that is Sonar 21. How about that? This is Larry's website, and he talks about the annual threat assessment. There you go. That's a hot mess. It wasn't a leak. It was a devious Charlie Foxtrot. You are 100%. I agree with you about the signal. So you see all kinds of things going on there. Great articles. You can subscribe there. You can donate and support. As I say all the time, everybody that out here that's doing this, we got to eat, and we're doing a lot of hard work. So make sure you support Larry and any way you can. And we really appreciate the work you're doing, Larry. And Sonar 21, I go there all the time. I suspect that if you're in this chat, you kind of see the world similar to the way I do, or you wouldn't be watching my shows all the time. So go to sonar21.com so we can all be on the same vibe. Any last words before you go, Larry?
No, I just thank you for what you do, because your voice speaking out, you're helping reach people. We have been captives of the mainstream media. Thank God we got some freedom now. And to have independent voices like yours out there is just critical. So,
all right,
thanks for having the balls to stand up and be a man.
Thanks a lot. All right, everybody, and the most important thing is, I didn't even, and I forgot to put my thing going across the bottom there. So follow me on Rockfin, follow me on Telegram. Follow me on Rumble. You never know what YouTube can do. And sometimes they'll simply just take a show. People know, people contacted me about a show I did the other week. Sometimes they'll just decide, we don't think this show should be up, and they'll just get rid of a show. If that ever happens, you can go to Rockfin or Rumble and find that show. So follow me there if you can afford it. Patreon, buy me a coffee, whatever. Support the channel. If you can't, doesn't matter. Just share this on all your social media platforms. That's one of the best things you could possibly do. Thanks a lot, you all. We're out.